Hello all, welcome to Universal Group of Institutions, Bangalore. Welcome to our special KAS mains series, Economics under 20 minutes. In this particular session, we are going to discuss about the industry. As you are already aware, we are right now dealing with the unit number 1. In our previous two videos, we have discussed about the agriculture. Now, in the next two videos we are going to discuss about the industry, okay, as because we are looking at all these topics in a very different manner. It's a keyword and a data driven series. ನೀವು ನೋಡಿದ ಹಾಗೆ in our second session, in our second video session of agriculture, where we have clearly understood the important keywords, dimensions, and the data that must be used in answering any question related to the agriculture. Similarly, here in this particular session, we are going to look at the aspects related to the industry. Now, coming to the today's video lecture. So, in one video lecture series on industries, we are going to understand three important things. The first one is we are going to understand about the British industrial policy. So then later we are going to discuss about the economic policy of India related to the industry, and then we are specifically start looking at what happened to the Indian industrial development. As ನಾನು ಹೇಳಿದಾಗೆ, see, to understand the present better, ಈಗಿನ ವರ್ತಮಾನ ಕಾಲವನ್ನು ನಾವು ತುಂಬ ಚೆನ್ನಾಗಿ ಅರ್ಥ ಮಾಡ್ಕೋಬೇಕು ಅಂತಂದರೆ ವಿ ಆರ್ ಸಪೋಸ್ ಟು ಅಂಡರ್ಸ್ಟ್ಯಾಂಡ್ ವಾಟ್ ಹ್ಯಾಸ್ ಹ್ಯಾಪನ್ ಇನ್ ದಿ ಪಾಸ್ಟಲ್ಲಿ ಏನಾಗಿದೆ ಮತ್ತು ಭವಿಷ್ಯದ ರೂಪುರೇಷೆಗಳನ್ನು ನಿರ್ಮಿಸಬೇಕು, ಅಥವಾ ಟು ಕಮ್ ಅಪ್ ವಿತ್ ಅ ಪಾಲಿಸಿ ಫ್ರೇಮ್ವರ್ಕ್ ಆರ್ ಆಫ್ ಆ್ಯಕ್ಷನ್ ಫ್ರೇಮ್ವರ್ಕ್. ವಿ ಆರ್ ಸಪೋಸ್ ಟು ಅಂಡರ್ಸ್ಟ್ಯಾಂಡ್ ವಾಟ್ ಹ್ಯಾಸ್ ಹ್ಯಾಪನ್ ಇನ್ ದಿ ಪಾಸ್ಟ್ and what is happening in the present. Then only we will be able to come out with the clear strategy for the future. So now coming to the first aspect, that is the British industrial policy. First and foremost, we need to understand about this British industrial policy. So before the British came to India, if you look at the mid 17th century, during the later years of the Aurangzeb, now we clearly see that India and China collectively contributed nearly 2/3 of the world's GDP. ಅಂದರೆ ಭಾಗಶಃ 65% ಗ್ಲೋಬಲ್ GDP ಯಲ್ಲಿ ಕೇವಲ ಎರಡು ಕಂಟ್ರಿ ಡಾಮಿನೇಟ್ ಮಾಡ್ತಾ ಇದ್ವು. ಒಂದು ಭಾರತ, ಇನ್ನೊಂದು ಚೈನಾ. ದಟ್ ಮೀನ್ಸ್ ಇಂಡಿಯಾ ವಾಸ್ ಅ ವೈಬ್ರೆಂಟ್ ಎಕಾನಮಿ ಬೈ ದಿ ಮಿಡ್ 17th century. ಸೊ ಹೀಗಿರುವಾಗ ಇಟ್ ಅಟ್ರಾಕ್ಟೆಡ್ ದಿ ಯುರೋಪಿಯನ್ ಪವರ್ಸ್. India started to trade with all these European powers. So one trading body, that is the East India Company, British East India Company, came to India as a trading body, and finally they were able to colonize India by the end of a first war of independence, that is 1857 revolt. So what were the British policies? British policy was a first and foremost, India was mere exporter of a raw material. India was the destination for the finished goods. So ಬ್ರಿಟಿಷ್ ಅಂದರೆ ಅಂದಿನ ಯುನೈಟೆಡ್ ಕಿಂಗ್ಡಮ್ಗೆ ಇರುವಂಥ ಅಗತ್ಯ, ಬ್ರಿಟನ್ಗೆ ಇರುವಂಥ ಅಗತ್ಯಗಳನ್ನು ಯಾಕಂದರೆ ಅಂದಿನ ಸಮಯದಲ್ಲಿ ಬ್ರಿಟನಲ್ಲಿ ಪ್ರಥಮ ಔದ್ಯೋಗಿಕ ಕ್ರಾಂತಿ ಆಗ್ತಾಯಿತ್ತು, ಫಸ್ಟ್ ಇಂಡಸ್ಟ್ರಿಯಲ್ ರೆವಲ್ಯೂಷನ್. ಆ ಇಂಡಸ್ಟ್ರಿಯಲ್ ರೆವಲ್ಯೂಷನ್ಗೆ ಅಗತ್ಯವಿರುವಂತಹ ರಾ ಮಟೀರಿಯಲ್, ಕಚ್ಚಾ ವಸ್ತುಗಳೆಲ್ಲ ಎಲ್ಲಿಂದ ಹೋಗ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದು? ಅದು ಭಾರತದಿಂದ. ಸೆಕೆಂಡ್, the foreign trade policy related to the India were all decided by the British. ಯಾರೊಂದಿಗೆ ಆಮದು ಆಗಬೇಕು, ಯಾರೊಂದಿಗೆ ರಫ್ತುಗಳು ಆಗಬೇಕು, ಅದೆಲ್ಲವೂ ಬ್ರಿಟಿಷರೇ ಡಿಸೈಡ್ ಮಾಡ್ತಾ ಇದ್ರು. So what the Britain have done, they have said very clearly, India was mere exporter of the raw material and it's a destination for the finished goods. If you analyze their overall policies, some of the main observations of that policy was that first and foremost was the colonial de-industrialization has happened. That means the systematic de-industrialization has taken place during that time. Industrygalu, modern industries were not established. Modern industry, when I say modern industry, that is more using the heavy machinery. Anta capital goods industrygalanna British did not established at all. So the modern industries that you see during the time of the British, either they were a cotton industry or a jute industries or the industries related to the textile industry. So the modern industry growth that is revolving around the cotton, jute and the textile industry, they were developed during the interwar industrial war. That means right after the end of a First World War and right before the start of the Second World War. Even the right, that is the early 1920 in the start of 1940 ನಡುವೆ ಅಂದರೆ ಆ ಒಂದು 20-25 ವರ್ಷದ ನಡುವೆ ಮಾಡರ್ನ್ ಇಂಡಸ್ಟ್ರಿಯಲ್ ಗ್ರೋತ್ ಅನ್ನು ನಾವು ನೋಡ್ತೀವಿ. So if you look at the focus as I said, I mean we were more of the supplier of the raw material. Modern industry growth agide, but that is more limited to the cotton, jute and the textile. Some of the notable capital good industry, I mean Tata steel industry is the notable example that was established during the time of the British. Now if you look at the overall things, I mean the overall experience when the British left, India, I mean when India gained independence, India was hopelessly poor. 3/4 of the population was living below poverty line. So with this experience, I mean, and by the global experience, by the end of a Second World War, I mean all the major European powers, I mean including the Asian power that was the Japan, all their experience taught us only one single lesson. That is, if you have to escape the poverty, the nation has to go for a rapid industrialization. Even we decided to go for a rapid industrialization because 3/4 of the population was vulnerable to the poverty. So ee poverty inda ನಾವು escape ಆಗಬೇಕು ಅಂತಂದ್ರೆ we have to take a path of a rapid industrialization. So one thing was very clear before our founding fathers, that India has to take a path of a rapid industrialization. So we decided, hagadre the next question was before us, who has to play the dominant role? Rapid industrialization ಮಾಡಬೇಕು ನಿಜ, ಯಾರು ಇದರಲ್ಲಿ ನಿರ್ಣಾಯಕ ಪಾತ್ರವನ್ನು ಮಾಡಬೇಕು? ಯಾಕಂದ್ರೆ ಎಕನಾಮಿಕ್ಸ್ ಅಲ್ಲಿ the fundamental questions we always have before us is what to produce, how to produce and for whom to produce. ಇದನ್ನೆಲ್ಲ ಯಾರು ಮಾಡಬೇಕು ಅಂತಂದ್ರೆ we came up with a simple solution saying that state has to play the dominant role. ಸರ್ಕಾರ ತುಂಬಾ ನಿರ್ಣಾಯಕವಾದ ಪಾತ್ರವನ್ನ ಮಾಡಬೇಕಂತ ಸ್ಪಷ್ಟವಾಗಿ ಹೇಳ್ತೀವಿ. ಸೊ ಈ ಒಂದು ಕಾಲ ಈಗ ನೀವು ನೋಡ್ತೀರಿ ಅಂತಲ್ಲ, which we refer the early phase of the after independence, the first 2 decades, we call, since it was dominated by the Prime Minister Nehru, we call it as the Nehruvian economics. So 2 things that we need to understand about the Nehruvian economics, 2 fundamental things. One, Nehru was a staunch socialist. He was very much inspired by the socialism that was existing in the Soviet Union. Okay, I mean he clearly said he was not a capitalist, neither he believes in the kings and princes, and nor he believes in the modern kings. Modern kings are nothing but the capitalists. So which is completely opposite of what the Gandhi believed in. Gandhi believed in more of a village sustained economics. I mean village need to be vibrant, where the Nehru believed in the modern economics, that is where everything needs to be dominated by these modern industries. One kade cottage industry, khadi industry needs to dominate the economy. Innondu kade Nehru ಹೇಳ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದಾರೆ modern industry needs to dominate the economics. So, I mean the nation has to be dominated. So later, I mean after the death of the Gandhi himself, so Nehru became more dominant figure in the Indian political arena. So his economic policies started to dominate the every sphere. And here, since he was already inspired by the Soviet model of economics, the one important thing that we adopted from this Soviet economics was the 5-year planning. So right after the independence, we also had these 5-year planning. ಈ 5-year planning ಅಲ್ಲೇ ನಾವು ಸ್ಪಷ್ಟವಾಗಿ ಒಂದು 5 ವರ್ಷದಲ್ಲಿ ನಾವು the goals that needs to be reached, the objectives that needs to be fulfilled, that were clearly spelled out. ಮತ್ತೆ ರಿಸೋರ್ಸ್ ಅನ್ನ ಅಂದ್ರೆ ಹಣವನ್ನು ಹೇಗೆ ಹೊಂದಿಸಬೇಕು, the resource mobilization was also clearly decided. So to fulfill this all the things, we have established one important non-statutory, non-constitutional body called as the Planning Commission. Let me sum up about this, what we have discussed till now. One, what happened with to India during the time of a British, complete de-industrialization. I mean, India, if you look at the industrial growth, that was stagnant. I mean, especially of the 1900 to 1950, industry was growing somewhere around 1.5% to the 2%. That is, we can say that is hopelessly stagnant. So de-industrialization ಆಗಿತ್ತು, because if you look at the simple statistics way about the workforce, can you see a workforce sector share in the workforce? Industry was contributing only 9.6. ಅದರಲ್ಲೂ ಕೂಡ ಜಾಸ್ತಿ ಜನ ಇರುವಂಥವರು, they were part of the small scale industry. ಮಾಡರ್ನ್ ಇಂಡಸ್ಟ್ರಿಯಲ್ಲಿ ವರ್ಕ್ ಮಾಡುತ್ತಿರುವಂಥ ಜನ ಕೇವಲ 1.8. ವಿ ವಾಂಟೆಡ್ ಟು ಎಸ್ಕೇಪ್ ದಿ ಪಾವರ್ಟಿ, ವಿ ವಾಂಟೆಡ್ ಟು ಅಚೀವ್ ದಿ ಹೈಯರ್ ಗೋಲ್ಸ್ ಆಫ್ ದಿ ಪ್ರಾಸ್ಪ್ಯಾರಿಟಿ, ವಿ ವಾಂಟೆಡ್ ಟು ಬಿಕಮ್ ರಿಚ್, ವಿ ವಾಂಟೆಡ್ ಟು ಎನ್ಹ್ಯಾನ್ಸ್, ಬಿಕಾಸ್ ಈವನ್ ಇಫ್ ಯು ಲುಕ್ ಎಟ್ ದಿ ವಿಶ್ವೇಶ್ವರಯ್ಯ ಪ್ಲಾನ್, he said that we can increase our per capita income, double ಮಾಡಬಹುದು within a 10 years. ಹೇಗೆ ಅಂದರೆ ವಿ ನೀಡ್ ಟು ಸೆಟ್ ಅಪ್ ಮೋರ್ ಆ್ಯಂಡ್ ಮೋರ್ ಮಾಡರ್ನ್ ಇಂಡಸ್ಟ್ರೀಸ್. ದಟ್ಸ್ ದ ರೀಸನ್, ಲುಕ್ ಎಟ್ ಕರ್ನಾಟಕದಲ್ಲಿ ನೋಡಿ, ಐ ಮೀನ್ ಲುಕ್ ಎಟ್ ಆಲ್ ದಿ ಮಾಡರ್ನ್ ಇಂಡಸ್ಟ್ರೀಸ್ ದಟ್ ವರ್ ಎಸ್ಟಾಬ್ಲಿಷ್ಡ್ ಡ್ಯೂರಿಂಗ್ ದಿ ಟೈಮ್ ಆಫ್ ದಿ ವಿಶ್ವೇಶ್ವರಯ್ಯ, ಬಿಕಾಸ್ he was rightly believed that industries are very much essential for the prosperity. So ಇದರ ಒಂದು ಲೈನಲ್ಲೇ, I mean, Nehru was also firm believer that public sector undertakings must play the dominant role. State has to play the dominant role. Who, what to produce, how to produce, for whom to produce, ಇದೆಲ್ಲವೂ ಕೂಡ ಇದು ಸರ್ಕಾರನೇ ನಿರ್ಣಾಯಕ ಪಾತ್ರವನ್ನು ನಿರ್ವಹಿಸಬೇಕು ಅಂತ ಸ್ಪಷ್ಟವಾಗಿ ನಿರ್ಣಯವನ್ನು ತಗೊಳ್ತಾರೆ. Now, going to the, so what he did, he called, I mean, he started to set up the public sector undertakings. He started to build more and more dams, because dams are a multi-purpose project. Dams is going to, provide drinking water supply. I mean, dam is going to provide water for the irrigation. Dam is also going to generate the electricity, which is very much essential for these industries to function. So, if you look at some of his policies, I mean, that is about this in PSU, which he described as the temples of modern India. So now, if we have to understand the industrial development that has taken place in the independent India, we divide it into, for our simplification, we divide it into 3 phases. One, the phase of 1948 to 1980, where state was controlling every sphere of economic life. Second was the phase of 1980 to 1991, where we started to open up a little bit, where we started to ಖಾಸಗಿ ರಂಗಕ್ಕೆ ಸ್ವಲ್ಪ ಪಾತ್ರವನ್ನು ಕೊಡೋದಕ್ಕೆ ಸ್ಟಾರ್ಟ್ ಮಾಡಿದ್ವಿ. I mean, right after the 1991, I mean, as you are very much aware, 1991 happens to be the landmark year where we carried out the LPG reforms. 1991 to 2024, we call it as the, years where we carried out the extensive market reforms. Now, coming to the 1948 to 1980, ಇದರಲ್ಲಿ ಕೂಡ again 1948 to 1980 ಅಲ್ಲಿ we have 2 phases. One is 1951 to 1964 till the death of Nehru himself. Then 1964 to 1980, because it was dominated after the death of the Nehru. It was dominated by the Prime Minister Shastri, Prime Minister Indira Gandhi, and then we also had the Morarji Desai, and finally Indira Gandhi again becomes the Prime Minister. So if you look at some of the policies of this 1948 to 1980, the first one, as I said, heavy domination of 5-year plan. State was given extensive and an effective role. I mean, the public sector, I mean, if you look at the industrial policy 1956, industrial policy 1956, which has divided the industry. Some of the industries was purely reserved for the public sector. ಪಬ್ಲಿಕ್ ಸೆಕ್ಟರನ್ನು, ಅಂದರೆ ಸರ್ಕಾರ ಸಂಸ್ಥೆಗಳನ್ನು ಹೊರತುಪಡಿಸಿ ಯಾವುದೇ ಖಾಸಗಿ ಸಂಸ್ಥೆ ಆ ಒಂದು ವಿಭಾಗದಲ್ಲಿ ಕಾರ್ಯನಿರ್ವಹಿಸುವಂತಿಲ್ಲ. I mean, some of the products or some of the industries were purely reserved for the small scale industry. Private sector was only meant to play the complementary role. That was the number 1. Number 2, it was an era of industrial licensing. To quantity produce ಮಾಡಬೇಕು. I mean, the private sector was supposed to get the permission from the government at every stage, even to increase the production, even to import, they were supposed to get the permission. That's the reason we call it as the era of a license Raj and the inspector Raj. Then public sector expansion, as I said, public sector PSU, they were given a very dominant role. They were, influencing every sphere of the economic life. Trade and foreign investment, these are second most, if you look at the Nehruvian economics, second important characteristics. In the early years we were very suspicious about this foreign investment and foreign imports that were happening. So this trade and foreign investment, what has happened is, rather than encouraging the export, our policy was more concentrated about the imports. We were more looking at, we call it as the import substitution policy. Rather than importing, enhance the domestic industry. ಅಂದರೆ ಆಮದು ಮಾಡಿಕೊಳ್ಳೋದಕ್ಕಿಂತ ಆ ಒಂದು ಪರ್ಟಿಕ್ಯುಲರ್ ಪ್ರಾಡಕ್ಟನ್ನು ನಮ್ಮಲ್ಲೇ ಉತ್ಪಾದಿಸಬೇಕು. ಆ ಒಂದು ಮೂಲಕ ಏನಾಗುತ್ತೆ, ಡೊಮೆಸ್ಟಿಕ್ ಇಂಡಸ್ಟ್ರಿ ಸ್ಟ್ರಾಂಗ್ ಆಗುತ್ತೆ. ಅದೇ ರೀತಿ ಇಟ್ ಈಸ್ ಗೋಯಿಂಗ್ ಟು ಕ್ರಿಯೇಟ್ ದಿ ಎಂಪ್ಲಾಯ್ಮೆಂಟ್ ಆಪರ್ಚುನಿಟೀಸ್ within the India. At the same time, the next important characteristic of this phase is the price and resource control. That means, as I said, what to produce, how to produce, for whom to produce, and Essential Commodity Act mulaka they started fixing the prices. So these are the 5 important characteristics of this particular phase. If you look at the performance, you nodidira on a positive side. See, from 1900 to 1950, Indian industries were stagnant. Okay. Right after, if you look at the simple data from 1950 to 1964 of this Nehru period itself, industry has grown at a 4% average. Considering that stagnation, this is an impressive growth. But ಹಾಕಿಕೊಂಡಿರುವಂಥ goal, ಹಾಕಿಕೊಂಡಿರುವಂಥ ಉದ್ದೇಶ ಈಡೇರಲಿಲ್ಲ. ಅಂದರೆ ಡೆಫಿನೆಟ್ಲಿ we have done well, but we failed to reach our goals. The first and foremost, some of the growth rate and industrial development, industry has expanded, but our exports have not. Because yakandre, if you look at it at the same time, if you compare, simple on the comparative analysis madandre, if you compare with the East Asian countries at that time, or the Japan at that time, every country has encouraged the exports, but India has not encouraged the export. Rather than encouraging the exports, our policy was more focusing on the import substitution. However, import and export and order, we focus more on the import substitution rather than enhancing these industries. Empowering them to export more, which did not happen. Public sector became dominant. Public sector were not facing any competition. So automatically, what they become? They become less competitive, because yakandre competition illa andre we are going to become a less innovative. Once we become a less innovative, we are going to become a inefficient. Overall, if you look at the assessment, for sure we done well, but our performance has failed to meet the intended targets. If you look at the keywords that are supposed to be used, ಮಾಡಲೇಬೇಕು ಅಂದರೆ 5-year ಪ್ಲಾನ್ಗಳ ಬಗ್ಗೆ ಬರೀಲೇಬೇಕು, ಇಂಡಸ್ಟ್ರಿಯಲ್ ಲೈಸೆನ್ಸಿಂಗ್ ಬಗ್ಗೆ ಬರೀಲೇಬೇಕು, ಇಂಪೋರ್ಟ್ ಸಬ್ಸ್ಟಿಟ್ಯೂಷನ್ ಬಗ್ಗೆ ಬರೀಲೇಬೇಕು, ಮತ್ತು ದ ಡಾಮಿನೇಷನ್ ಆಫ್ ಪಬ್ಲಿಕ್ ಸೆಕ್ಟರ್, ಕ್ಯಾಪಿಟಲ್ ಗೂಡ್ಸ್ ಇಂಡಸ್ಟ್ರಿ. ನಾನು ಹೇಳಿದ್ನಲ್ಲ, ಬ್ರಿಟಿಷ್ ಆಳ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದಾಗ ಕ್ಯಾಪಿಟಲ್ ಗೂಡ್ಸ್ ಇಂಡಸ್ಟ್ರೀಸ್ ವರ್ ನಾಟ್ ದ್ಯಾಟ್ ರ್ಯಾಪೆಂಟ್, that were not dominant. We can say mere non-existence. Virtually, they were non-existent ಅಂತ ಹೇಳ್ಬೋದು. Small scale industries we gave a dominant role. ನನಗೆ ಸ್ಟಾಟ್ ಕೂಡ ತೋರಿಸಿದಾಗ where more number of people were working, they were working clearly in the small scale industry. Again, because small scale industry ಗೆ ತುಂಬ ಇಂಪಾರ್ಟೆನ್ಸ್ ಕೊಡ್ತೀವಿ. The reason being, small scale industries are the labor intense. Because even if you look at the Ambedkar's economic policy, okay, he said that because India was a labor surplus nation, ಅಗ್ರಿಕಲ್ಚರಲ್ಲಿ ಅಗತ್ಯಕ್ಕಿಂತ ಹೆಚ್ಚು ಜನ ವರ್ಕ್ ಮಾಡ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದಾರೆ. ಆ ಹೆಚ್ಚು ಜನ ಲೇಬರ್ ಏನು ಜಾಸ್ತಿ ವರ್ಕ್ ಮಾಡ್ತಾ ಇದ್ರಲ್ಲ, ಇಫ್ ವಿ ಹ್ಯಾವ್ ಟು ಅಬ್ಸಾರ್ಬ್ ದೆಮ್, ಈಗ ಅಬ್ಸಾರ್ಬ್ ಮಾಡಬೇಕು ಅಂದರೆ ಇಂಡಸ್ಟ್ರಿ ಹ್ಯಾಸ್ ಟು ಎಕ್ಸ್ಪ್ಯಾಂಡ್, ಇಂಡಸ್ಟ್ರಿ ಹ್ಯಾಸ್ ಟು ಗ್ರೋ ಎಟ್ ಅ ರ್ಯಾಪಿಡ್ ರೇಟ್. ಸೊ ಎಟ್ ದಟ್ ಟೈಮ್ ವಿ ಆಲ್ ಎನ್ವಿಸೇಜ್ಡ್ ಸ್ಮಾಲ್ ಸ್ಕೇಲ್ ಇಂಡಸ್ಟ್ರಿಗೆ ಅಗತ್ಯಕ್ಕಿಂತ ಜಾಸ್ತಿ ಪಾತ್ರವನ್ನು ನಾವು ಕೊಟ್ವಿ. ದ ರೀಸನ್ ಬೀಂಗ್ ಸ್ಮಾಲ್ ಸ್ಕೇಲ್ ಇಂಡಸ್ಟ್ರೀಸ್ ಆರ್ ಲೇಬರ್ ಇಂಟೆನ್ಸಿವ್, ಪ್ರೈಸ್ ಕಂಟ್ರೋಲ್, foreign direct investment ಅನ್ನ we did not encourage that actively. ನೀವೀಗ ಇನ್ನು 2024 ಅಲ್ಲಿ ನೋಡ್ತೀರಾ ಅಥವಾ ರೈಟ್ ಆಫ್ಟರ್ ದಿ 1991 in foreign direct investment ಗೆ ನಾವು encouragement ಇದೆಲ್ಲ, we have not encouraged that. There was foreign direct investment only wherever there was essential. Economic crisis because all these public sector have become less efficient. They were not able to generate the revenue. Government is spending more, fiscal deficit ಆಗ್ತಾ ಇತ್ತು. So ultimately it was leading towards the economic crisis. These were some of the performance, some of the things that happened during the phase of 1948 to 1980. So ಈ ಒಂದು ಪ್ರಸ್ತುತ ವಿಡಿಯೋದಲ್ಲಿ we discussed what has happened to India from 1948 to 1990. I mean, that's it from our end in this particular video. In the next video, we are going to look at what happened to India in 1980 to 1991. 1991 ಮತ್ತೆ 2024 ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಏನಾಯಿತು, ಅದಾದ ಮೇಲೆ we are going to look at some of these schemes that were brought in the last 78 years. ಮತ್ತೆ ಕೆಲವೊಂದು ಇಂಪಾರ್ಟೆಂಟ್ ಡೇಟಾಗಳನ್ನು we ನೋಡ್ತೀವಿ. Because I am saying this again very clearly, in economics we are supposed to use data and the relevant scheme, then only our answer is going to become more effective ಆಗುತ್ತೆ. If you haven't watched our video on do's and don'ts for the mains preparation, please do watch it. ಯಾಕಂದರೆ ಯಾವ ರೀತಿ ಆನ್ಸರ್ ಇರಬೇಕು, what is a role played by the introduction, conclusion, that matters a lot. So that's it from our end in this particular video. If you have any comments, if you have any doubts, please do ask in our comment section. Thank you, and do subscribe our channel.